All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're looking at a collection of news from India for February 26th, 2025.
It's quite the mix today. Everything from politics and Bollywood to cricket and even a little bit about religion.
Should be interesting. Why don't we kick things off by looking at some international relations? Specifically, the pressure that the EU is facing about how to handle their relationship with India.
Ah, yes. Groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, they want the EU to take a much stronger stance when it comes to, India's human rights record.
Right. And this is especially important now because the Indian president's upcoming visit.
Exactly, exactly. They're saying that the EU can't just, focus on trade and diplomacy and then ignore human rights at the same time.
Yeah, it seems like a tough balancing act.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the specific issues that are being raised?
Well, one big one is this alleged misuse of anti-terror laws, basically to silence any critics of the government. And this isn't a brand new issue, but it does seem to be escalating.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning.
And it's raising questions about democratic freedoms in India overall.
So the EU, I mean, they clearly see India as a key player in the region, both economically and strategically.
For sure.
But yeah, how do they balance those interests with, taking a strong stance on these human rights concerns?
Yeah, big question. I'm very curious to see how this all plays out.
Me too. All right, well, let's move on to a story that's shaking things up in Indian politics.
Okay.
The Supreme Court, they've overturned the expulsion of a legislator. This guy, Sunil Kumar Singh, he had made some controversial remarks.
Right, right. So this case, it really boils down to the balance of power between different branches of government. I mean, this guy, Singh, he was expelled from the Bihar Assembly.
Right.
And it was because he used some, let's say, derogatory language towards the chief minister. But the Supreme Court, they said that punishment, it was excessive. They said it actually violated his freedom of speech.
So it's not so much about what he said. It's more about the legislature's power to punish its own members.
Yeah, I mean, this ruling could have a big impact on future cases about legislative discipline.
Okay, so now speaking of overstepping bounds, let's talk about the one nation, one election proposal.
This one, it's really generating a lot of debate in India. So the basic idea is to synchronize all the elections in the country, hold them all at the same time.
Interesting. I mean, at first glance, it seems like a good idea, right? Like more efficient, cost-effective, less disruptive.
Right. The supporters, they're saying it would streamline the logistics, reduce campaign spending.
Right.
But then the critics are raising some concerns about fairness.
Yeah, I could see how that could be a problem.
Like, one worry is that if you have all the elections at once, it gives the ruling party an advantage, right?
Because national issues might overshadow local concerns.
Exactly. And then there's the worry about voters just being swayed by a popular national leader. They might not focus as much on local candidates and their platforms.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it really raises questions about whether one nation, one election would actually be fair.
Yeah. Would it be truly democratic?
It's tough.
All right, well, let's shift gears from the political world to the financial world. So SEBI, India's market regulator, they're proposing stricter rules for the derivatives market. They want to make sure things are stable and to, reduce the risks.
Right. So when we talk about derivatives, these financial instruments can be used for hedging, they can be used for speculation,
Okay.
but they can be risky, especially if there's like excessive leverage or too much speculation.
Oh, I see.
So SEBI, they want to, tighten the regulations, like they might lower position limits, they might increase those margin requirements.
So it's all about, putting some safeguards in place, right?
Exactly. Trying to prevent excessive risk-taking and, protect the overall stability of the market.
Yeah. Okay, well, enough about serious stuff for now. How about we talk about something a little more fun?
Sounds good.
The Indian Premier League, the IPL, that's starting up soon.
It's not just fun, though. It's also big business. Oh, for sure. For sure. And especially now after that merger with Disney, Reliance is really trying to, maximize their revenue from the IPL. They're getting creative with their approach.
They're really going all out.
I even heard they're using, neuroscience to attract advertisers.
Yeah. Basically, they're saying that their platform, it's more engaging than, your Googles and your Metas of the world. They've done some brain mapping research, supposedly shows higher levels of attention, more emotional response, all that, to their ads. And they're also targeting smaller businesses, offering them some, more affordable ad packages.
Okay, so it's a bold strategy in a very, very crowded market. We'll have to see if it pays off.
It will be interesting to watch.
Now, speaking of competition, let's move on to Bollywood. Amir Khan, he recently talked about his film, La Pata Ladies.
Ah, yes.
It didn't make the Oscar shortlist.
Right, but his perspective on it was really refreshing, actually. He was very philosophical about the whole thing.
Yeah, I saw that.
He emphasized that, awards, they're just one measure of success.
And very subjective, too.
Very subjective. He was saying that the real measure of a film's success is its impact on the audience. Like, does it resonate with people?
I like that perspective.
It's a good reminder that art goes way beyond awards and accolades.
All right, well, let's shift gears to another arena where India is hoping to dominate.
Okay.
Cricket. The ICC Champions Trophy that's currently underway, and a lot of people think India is a top contender.
Definitely a strong team. And they've got this unique advantage going for them. All of their matches are being played in Dubai.
Oh, okay.
So they're not dealing with any travel fatigue. They've got consistent playing conditions.
That's a huge plus.
Huge plus. Really gives them a chance to focus on the game.
So even though it's not technically on home turf, they sort of have a home field advantage.
In a way, yeah. I mean, it does raise some questions about fairness, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, some might say it's giving India an unfair edge.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, they're playing by the rules.
True. And making the most of the situation.
Exactly.
So we'll see how that plays out. But I heard not all the matches have been going smoothly.
Right. The South Africa-Australia match, that one had to be abandoned.
I don't know why.
Rain. Heavy rain.
Oh, man. Bummer.
Yeah, it was a big disappointment for everyone.
Well, it's a good reminder that even in a sport as planned out as cricket, you just can't predict everything.
Mother Nature sometimes has other ideas.
That's for sure. All right, before we move on, I wanted to touch on the Mahakumbh Mela.
Yes.
That major Hindu festival just wrapped up recently.
Huge event, one of the largest religious gatherings in the world, actually.
Wow. So what happens there?
Well, millions of pilgrims, they all go to the sacred confluence of rivers in Prayagraj.
Okay.
And they do ritual bathing, spiritual renewal.
It's amazing how many people participate in something like that.
Yeah, it's really a testament to the power of faith and tradition in India.
It is. Now, amidst this massive gathering, there was a seemingly small incident that caused some debate.
Right. This young spiritual influencer, Abhinav Arora.
Yeah, what about him?
He was seen carrying a luxury Dior backpack.
And that was controversial.
Yeah, because of the material. There were questions about whether it was made of leather, and that would be, with the religious significance of cows in Hinduism.
Yeah.
Sensitive topic.
Very sensitive. His father did clarify that it wasn't leather, but it definitely sparked a conversation about, public image and how do you navigate these modern influences even within, a traditional setting.
It's interesting how something like that can become such a big deal.
Yeah, especially in the age of social media. Everything gets amplified.
So true. Yeah, it's a reminder that even in a place like the Kumbh Mela, with all its traditions and rituals, the modern world is still right there with you.
It is, very much so. Okay, well, let's circle back to that international situation for a minute. We were talking about the pressure on the EU to address India's human rights.
Right.
And those groups that are calling for action, they've highlighted some really specific concerns, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the big things they're pointing to is this crackdown on civil liberties, like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, all that.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming.
And a lot of people are saying that journalists, activists, anyone who criticizes the government, they face, intimidation, harassment, sometimes even legal action.
So it's not just about, expressing your opinions freely. It goes beyond that.
Right. There are also concerns about how religious minorities are being treated, particularly Muslims and Christians.
Yeah, I've read about some of those cases.
There have been reports of laws and policies that are, discriminatory, specifically targeting these communities. And there's also this rise in hate speech and violence.
It's really troubling to hear all of that.
Yeah, it is. And that's why these groups are urging the EU to, really address these issues directly with the Indian government.
I mean, it's such a delicate situation for the EU, though.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they want to have a good relationship with India, but they also, they have to stand up for their values.
It's a tough spot to be in.
So what are some of the things that these groups are actually asking for? Like, what specific actions do they want to see?
Well, they're saying the EU should use its influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Diplomatic leverage, economic leverage, all of that, to push for some real change.
Like what kind of change specifically?
Well, for one, they want to see some of those discriminatory laws repealed, and they're also calling for the release of political prisoners. And they want to see an end to this surveillance and harassment of activists and journalists.
So they're not just looking for, lip service. They want to see some real concrete action.
Exactly. Words aren't enough.
Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the EU responds.
For sure. Big implications either way.
Okay, well, let's go back to that Supreme Court ruling for a second. The one about that legislator who was expelled.
Oh, right.
We talked about how it touches on this balance of power between different branches of government.
Yeah.
But we didn't really get into the specifics of his, I think they called them abhorrent remarks.
Yeah, that's what they called them. Honestly, the court documents, they don't give us like a word-for-word account of what he actually said.
Okay.
But they do say that he made some pretty derogatory comments, some offensive comments, talking about the chief minister of Bihar during a debate.
So it was something serious enough to warrant some kind of disciplinary action.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the Supreme Court, their decision, it wasn't about saying his behavior was okay. It was more about, making sure the punishment fit the crime. They said expulsion was too much.
Right. They felt it was excessive.
They said it violated his freedom of speech.
Oh, wow.
And that it could set a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So this ruling, it could actually have consequences way beyond just this one case.
Absolutely. It sets a precedent for how these kinds of situations are handled in the future. How do legislatures go about disciplining their own members? It's a big question.
It is. It's a tricky situation. So basically, it just reinforces the importance of judicial review, right? Making sure that different branches of government stay in their lane.
That's exactly it. And it also highlights how tricky it is to find that balance. I mean, you want to keep order within a legislative body, right? But you also have to protect the rights of its members.
Yeah, those rights are important.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, it's a reminder that freedom of speech, even in a democracy, it's not without limits.
That's right.
There are some lines you just can't cross. Okay, well, let's talk more about that one nation, one election idea.
Okay.
We touched on the potential benefits, streamlining things. But we also talked about the concerns about, fairness and democratic principles.
Right.
I'm curious about the logistics. Like, how would they even pull that off?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, India is huge, right?
Enormous.
And it's got such a complex electoral system. So trying to hold elections for the national parliament and all state assemblies at the same time.
That's a lot to coordinate.
It's a massive undertaking. You're talking about polling booths, security, transporting those voting machines, training all the officials.
Yeah, it sounds like a logistical nightmare. I mean, even holding a single election in India is a huge deal.
Absolutely. And then there's the question of voter fatigue, right? I mean, if you're throwing multiple elections at people all at once, it could be overwhelming.
They're going to be bombarded with information.
Exactly. And it might make it harder for them to, really make informed decisions. And it could even lead to lower voter turnout.
So just the logistical challenges alone make this whole thing seem pretty unrealistic.
Yeah. And then even if you could somehow overcome all of those hurdles, you still have to deal with the concerns about fairness and bias.
Right. Like we were saying before, holding all the elections at the same time could give the ruling party an advantage.
Right. National issues might overshadow those local concerns, and you might see people just voting for the same party across the board,
Yeah, so it could really concentrate power.
It's complicated. There are strong arguments on both sides.
There are. It's definitely something to think about.
Hmm.
Okay, well, let's switch gears again and go back to the world of finance.
Okay.
We were talking about SEBI and those proposed regulations for the derivatives market.
Right.
What exactly are they worried about? What led them to propose these changes?
So SEBI, they're really worried about the possibility of too much speculation in the derivatives market. They're concerned about volatility. And, that could spill over and affect the whole financial system.
So they're trying to avoid another, 2008 financial crisis situation.
Exactly. They don't want to see a repeat of that.
Makes sense.
So they've observed, more and more leverage trading, more of these complex derivatives products. And that just, increases the risk.
So they're basically trying to learn from the mistakes of the past and put some safeguards in place.
That's the idea.
So what are some of those safeguards?
Well, they're talking about things like lowering position limits, increasing margin requirements, making things more transparent overall.
So basically making it harder for investors to take on too much risk.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Which, that should hopefully help to stabilize the market. But then again, there's always that concern that if you over-regulate, it could stifle innovation.
Right. You don't want to scare away legitimate investors.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Oh, it is. Finding that sweet spot between protecting the market and allowing for growth, that's the challenge.
All right, well, let's take a break from the heavy stuff and get back to sports for a minute. We were talking about India's, I guess you could call it their Dubai advantage in the ICC Champions Trophy.
Right, right.
But, I mean, their success, it's got to be about more than just where they're playing, right?
Oh, for sure.
Hmm.
India, they've been one of the best cricket teams in the world consistently for a while now. And their recent success, it's a testament to, their skill, their hard work, their planning.
They've got a lot of talented players.
Very talented. Strong batting lineup, a great bowling attack. And their captain, he's known for his tactical skills.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
And they've also benefited from this really well-structured domestic cricket system. So you've got all these young players coming up. They're getting opportunities to compete at a high level. And the IPL, that's played a big role in that.
So it's really a combination of factors that have led to their success. It's not just luck.
Exactly. It's a whole system.
All right, well, let's talk about that match that didn't quite go as planned. The South Africa-Australia one.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
All that rain.
So much rain. They had to abandon the match.
It's a shame for both teams and for the fans, too.
Definitely. It's a reminder that no matter how much you plan things out, sometimes you just can't control everything.
Yeah, Mother Nature has a way of doing their own thing.
Yeah, she does.
But, I mean, it does make things a little more unpredictable in the tournament now.
Oh, yeah, it throws a wrench in the standings, for sure. Both of those teams were undefeated before that, so now the pressure is on. They have to win the remaining matches if they want to move on.
Speaking of high-stakes competition, that's what's happening off the field, too, in the IPL.
Oh, yeah, big time.
All these media companies, they're all fighting for viewers and ad revenue.
It's a fierce battle.
And Reliance, their whole approach, using neuroscience to try to prove that their platform is better, I mean, it's pretty interesting.
It is. It's smart marketing. I mean, they're trying to appeal to advertisers by saying, look, we've got the data. Your ads are going to be more effective here.
Yeah, they're using science to back up their claims.
Exactly. And with the IPL, I mean, so many people are watching. It's global.
So there's a lot at stake.
It's a huge market.
All right, well, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, let's go back to Amir Khan for a minute.
Okay.
He had some interesting things to say about his film La Pata Ladies and how it didn't get shortlisted for the Oscars.
He did.
He seemed to have a very, a philosophical view of the whole thing.
He did. He was basically saying that, awards, they're not everything. They're one measure of success, but not the only one.
And they're very subjective, too.
Absolutely. He believes that a film's real success is about how it connects with the audience. Like, does it move them? Does it make them think? Does it stay with them?
Yeah, those are the things that matter.
Exactly. So it's a good reminder that, art is about more than just winning trophies.
It is. It's about the impact it has.
Exactly.
All right, well, before we wrap things up, I wanted to go back to the Mahakumbh Mela one last time.
Okay.
We talked about how big it is, how important it is spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm curious about its impact beyond that, like culturally, socially.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's not just a religious gathering. It's like a microcosm of Indian society.
So you've got people from all walks of life coming together.
All walks of life, different regions, different castes, different socioeconomic backgrounds. It's everyone.
It's a real melting pot.
It is. And for a little while, it's like all those differences, they kind of fade away. Everyone's there for this shared spiritual experience.
It's amazing.
It is. And, it's also a place for social and political discourse. A lot of those sadhus and saints, they use the Kumbh Mela as a platform.
To talk about important issues.
Yeah. It gives them a chance to connect with a huge audience and raise awareness about things that might otherwise go unnoticed.
So the Kumbh Mela, it's really this multifaceted event that captures, like, the essence of India.
It does. It's spiritual, it's cultural, it's social, it's all of it.
And it's a reminder that tradition is still incredibly powerful, even in a world that's changing so fast.
For sure. There's something very powerful about those ancient rituals and beliefs.
Yeah, it really is amazing how something like the Kumbh Mela can bring together so many different people and ideas. It speaks to how diverse and vibrant India is as a country,
It does. It's like even with all the changes happening in the world, some things just stay constant, Those traditions that have been around for centuries, they still have this hold on people.
Absolutely. And speaking of, tradition and modernity, I wanted to touch on that incident with the Dior backpack one more time,
Right.
because it seemed to spark this conversation about a lot more than just fashion.
Oh, for sure. I mean, on one level, it was about, this expensive luxury item kind of clashing with this image of, religious simplicity and austerity. But it also brought up these questions about, well, public image and authenticity, especially for young people who are, in the public eye.
It really made me think about the pressures that young people face today. I mean, they're constantly being judged and scrutinized, even in places that are supposed to be, sacred.
It's true. It's like they're trying to figure out how to navigate between these two worlds, the traditional world and then this modern digital world where everything they do is, amplified and shared instantly.
Yeah. So even in a place like the Kumbh, a place that's so deeply rooted in ancient rituals and beliefs, you still see these influences of modern culture popping up.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It shows you how these two forces are constantly interacting and shaping each other.
Okay, well, let's shift our focus back to the international scene for a bit. We were talking about the dilemma that the EU is facing with India.
Right. Balancing that relationship with, their commitment to human rights.
Exactly. And some people are saying, the EU shouldn't let economics get in the way of doing what's right. They should use whatever leverage they have to push for change, even if it means, damaging the relationship.
Right. That's the real politic versus idealism argument.
Yeah.
But then there are others who say, it's better to engage in dialogue, to work with India to improve human rights, rather than just isolating them.
So it's a really complex issue, as most of these are.
It is, and there are good points on both sides.
Ultimately, it's up to the EU to decide what they think is the best approach.
And whatever they decide, it's going to send a message to the rest of the world. It'll show how seriously they take these issues.
So it's a decision that's being watched very closely. All right, well, let's bring things back to India and just, recap some of the key stories we've discussed today.
Okay.
We talked about one nation, one election, that proposal to synchronize all the elections. We talked about that Supreme Court ruling that overturned the expulsion of that legislator. And then we delved into the world of finance with SEBI's proposed regulations for the derivatives market.
It's been a busy day in the news.
It has. But it's interesting how each of those stories, they kind of highlight a different aspect of India, a different challenge or opportunity.
It shows you a country that's dealing with a lot of complex issues, trying to find that balance between, tradition and modernity, economic growth and social justice, individual rights, and the needs of the community.
That's a lot to juggle.
It is. But it's an exciting time to be watching India. The country is changing so rapidly.
And it's a reminder that what happens in India, it doesn't just stay in India. It affects the whole world.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners today?
I would say it's the importance of staying informed, engaging with different perspectives, and just acknowledging that these issues, they're not black and white. They're complicated.
There are no easy answers.
Right. So it's about understanding the nuances, recognizing the challenges, but also appreciating the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, it's about seeing the full picture.
Exactly. And realizing that India's story, it's still being written. We're all a part of it in some way.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into India's news. We hope you learned something new, and we encourage you to keep exploring these topics on your own.
Absolutely. Stay curious.